Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Losing my wife Mary after 10 years of marriage was the most painful experience of my life. We had been high school sweethearts, and she was truly my other half. When Mary got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, it felt like my world came crashing down. We fought hard for 2 difficult years as the disease ravaged her body. Towards the end, she struggled to even speak. I stayed strong for her sake, even though deep down I was falling apart. The light in my life was flickering out rapidly. When the time came, I held her hand and whispered how much I loved her. She smiled faintly and breathed her last. My heart shattered into a million pieces. Making the funeral arrangements in a daze of grief, my only consolation was that Mary had left this world peacefully. Since we never had kids, I was Mary's sole beneficiary. She had inherited a considerable fortune from her grandmother, including stocks worth $750,000 and a $1.25 million house that became mine after she passed away. Mary's parents, Fred and Betty, were bitterly jealous of their daughter's wealth and resented me for marrying her. They caused constant drama at family gatherings with their snide remarks. According to them, I was a worthless bum who seduced Mary into marriage for her money, which was ridiculous since I had a well-paying job as an engineer. After the funeral, I isolated myself to process the grief. The doorbell kept buzzing insistently, but I ignored it, needing solitude. Later, I learned it was Fred and Betty making a nuisance of themselves. Over the next few days, they kept calling nonstop, leaving aggressive voicemails demanding I let them into Mary's house. I asked my neighbor Jerome to tell them to back off. Jerome said Fred nearly punched him before Betty dragged her husband away. A week later, I had regained some of my spirit and decided to visit Mary's grave with flowers. As I pulled up to the cemetery, I saw Fred's Cadillac parked nearby. My first thought was they were visiting Mary's grave, so I decided to avoid them. However, Jerome called me with alarming news. Fred and Betty had broken into my house. I sped back home to find the front door lock smashed. Inside, the in-laws were busy ransacking the place while yelling about finding Mary's will. Betty was stuffing jewelry into her purse while Fred was prying open cabinets. The shock quickly turned to anger. How dare they desecrate Mary's belongings like this? "Get the hell out of my house!" I bellowed. Fred smirked nastily. "Not your house anymore, son. This is all ours now." He waved a piece of paper in my face. "We got ourselves a copy of Mary's will. She left everything to me and Betty over here. This fancy house and all that money is ours now." I snatched the paper to inspect it. The will looked authentic at first glance, but something seemed off. The wording didn't sound like Mary at all. Plus, some details were inconsistent with the legal will Mary had shown me. "This is forged," I yelled. "Mary would never write you two out of her will after how terribly you treated her. Get out now before I call the cops." Betty suddenly lunged at me in a rage, screeching about me being an ungrateful thief. As we struggled, I saw Fred removing paintings from the walls to take them. That was the last straw. I shoved Betty aside and tackled Fred to the ground. We crashed into the wall, leaving a massive dent. Fred clawed at my face and landed a few solid punches, but rage and adrenaline pumped through me. I wasn't about to let this crook steal a single item from my house. In the scuffle, I managed to pin Fred down. Betty jumped on my back, digging her nails into my shoulders. The pain was agonizing, but I shook her off with great effort. She landed face first on the marble floor, breaking her nose. Blood gushed everywhere as she wailed. Fred was writhing under my weight, spitting curses at me. In the distance, I heard police sirens blaring. Betty must have tipped them off while I was restraining Fred. Minutes later, 2 officers burst in with guns raised. The scene before them was utter chaos. Broken furniture, smears of blood on the floor, walls dented. Fred took the chance to start shouting about how I attacked them out of nowhere. I quickly explained it was my house and they had broken in and were trying to steal everything because of a forged will. The cops apprehended Fred and Betty. One officer inspected the dubious will while his partner took our statements. After discovering Fred's long rap sheet, it was clear who the real criminals were. The forged will was the final nail in the coffin. The in-laws were arrested for burglary, theft, criminal damage to property, and fraud. As the cops led them away in handcuffs, Fred hollered threats about suing me for assault. I calmly told the officer I was acting in self-defense to stop them from robbing me. With the smashed door and ruined house as evidence, The cops reassured me I wouldn't face any charges. Fred and Betty's sole focus had been grabbing as much loot as possible. In the following weeks, I focused on restoring order to the house and my life. Mary's in-laws were churning up more trouble from jail, filing bogus lawsuits saying Mary verbally promised to leave them the house. They claimed I had bullied and coerced Mary into making me the sole beneficiary. To counter their ridiculous allegations, I presented Mary's legal will and my testimony as proof of her wishes. My lawyer sent them stern warnings to stop pursuing false litigation or face harsh penalties. The final judgment was clear. Mary's estate fully belonged to me. Fred blew his stack, spewing profanities in the courtroom when the verdict was announced. Betty broke down wailing about the injustice. I ended up getting a restraining order so they could never contact me again. With the drama finally over, I could once again focus on preserving Mary's memory in the house she loved. Although the pain of losing her remains, surrounding myself with our happy memories brings a sense of peace. The photo album we created for our 5th anniversary sits on the mantel. Her favorite perfume still lingers faintly on the sheets. Fred and Betty ended up with hefty fines and 5 years of prison each for their crimes. Turns out this wasn't their first time trying to illegally seize assets. They had done similar scams on relatives before. This time, though, their greed and jealousy backfired spectacularly, only landing them behind bars. Mary's spirit will live on in this house and in my heart. Coming through this ordeal has made me stronger. I know Mary would be proud that I didn't let her vile parents win. She valued justice and truth, something her parents tossed aside in their quest for wealth. Their toxicity and deception failed against our unbreakable bond. I can now cherish the happy memories of my life with her, without the toxicity of her family interfering ever again. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Got permission to share this from my buddy who is a software engineer. Background. To give you some background on my friend Tim, made-up name, he has been programming since he was like 7 years old. Tim said, by the time he got to college, he breezed through most of his comp sci classes because a lot of the content they were covering he had already mastered years prior. Tim is an excellent programmer. Tim's career has been quite successful. He's worked for Google, Facebook, Amazon, and finally a hedge fund. The story starts at the hedge fund. Tim works a lot with AI technology, and at this hedge fund, he was the lead programmer manager who spearheaded an effort to optimize their AI that helped them complete literally millions of trades a day. To say his work had a massive impact was an understatement. All of this is going on with COVID-19 in the background. Due to COVID-19, they went to a work-from-home model, where my friend Tim kept working. During the work from home, Tim was looking around his fancy $4,500 NYC apartment and wished for things like a yard, a heated pool, a nice 3-car garage, and not living in a high-rise. It dawned on Tim that he could leave NYC. Tim moves to Michigan, so Tim moved back to his hometown in Michigan, where he bought himself a really nice home with a heated pool, a 3-car garage, a nice yard. And guess what the yard had in it? A mother-in-love suite, which was essentially a 2-bedroom, 1-bath second home on the property of his main home, which he turned into his man cave. It's actually pretty sick. Oh yay, and his mortgage payment was far less than his $5K a month rent, like half. Tim spent the rest of his COVID-19 work from home pounding out projects, etc. He never actually informed his employer on an official basis he moved. He just kept working. Then COVID-19 ended. COVID-19 is finally over. Back to the office or, Tim boss. Larry calls him up and goes, all right, Tim, on Monday we are starting work back at the office. And Tim goes, yeah, about that. I moved to Michigan. Larry is shocked and goes, you didn't even ask if you could do that? And Tim basically said, I didn't know I needed your permission to move in a sarcastic as duck way. Larry insists that Tim needs to move back to NYC or he won't have a place on the team. Tim says he's been doing the exact same work from home at a high level for the past year. He's willing to travel to NYC for a few meetings a year on his own dime. But he feels his quality of life is so much higher outside of NYC, he has no desire to live in NYC, to which Larry said if Tim doesn't have any desire to live in NYC, then he has no desire to keep Tim employed. Now, dear Reddit, what do you think a talented senior programmer with over a decade of experience who specializes in AI technology is going to say to a response like that? If you're thinking he quit, you'd be absolutely right. He quit. Maintaining complex code can be hard. Now, anyone that has done any programming knows that sometimes the best person to maintain the code is the person who wrote the code. There's logic, there's thought processes. There's so much that goes into programming that can be so individualistic it can be hard for someone to take over a code base they didn't write. John, CEO, enters the picture. 6 weeks goes by when John calls Tim. John is the CEO of the hedge fund. John gets Tim to agree to consider coming back, so that's when John suggests they fly Tim to NYC and he sits down with John. Tim, however, flipped the switch and said, "No, how about you fly out to Michigan and we discuss this?" Tim said he said that because he wanted to establish if he was going to come back, it was going to be him working for Michigan, and if he was going to talk his employment, it was going to be done in Michigan. John agreed, and 2 days later flew out to meet with Tim. Tim sits down, and John says they really need him, because he provided a lot of value to the organization, and the programming team is struggling. John offers Tim the opportunity to come back with a 20% pay cut, since he won't be living in NYC, and John called that a cost of living adjustment. To which John said, "No, I want a 15% raise above what I was earning." John sits back and responds, "The reason we pay what we pay is because we ask you to live in NYC, and we understand that's an expensive city to live in." To which Tim says, "You pay what you pay, and you pay it because I am worth it. If I wasn't worth what you pay, you wouldn't be paying me. Now my first condition is if you want me back, it'll be a 15% raise." John goes, "And second?" "The second condition is I'll come back so long as Larry isn't there." John sighs, "You're asking for too much." To which Tim goes, "You don't need to bring me back if you don't want to. I'll be fine elsewhere." John goes, "I'll talk to the partners." Tim says, "My offer is good till Friday." John goes, "What do you mean?" Tim says, "Next Monday is when I'm going to start looking for work. This offer is good until Friday." It was Tuesday. John leaves. That Thursday, the phone rings. It's John. In conclusion, "Tim, we are transferring Larry to a different fund. He won't be working with you anymore, and we are fine with giving you a 15% raise. Can we send you an offer letter for you to sign?" Tim said, "Of course, and Larry is really gone?" John goes, "Yes, you will never need to interact with Larry ever again." That was at the start of this year. Tim hasn't been in NYC, hasn't heard from Larry, hasn't seen Larry on any communications, etc. The next one is a petty revenge story. My big brother recently got engaged to a lovely woman who makes him so happy. I'm thrilled for him, especially because he had a string of terrible girlfriends and messy breakups before meeting this woman, and he deserves someone good for him. One of those terrible girlfriends went on to marry our dad and become our stepmom. She is, to put it as nicely and tactfully as possible, a idiot. When she found out my brother was engaged, she first complained that she wasn't told at the same time he told his parents and siblings, "Which girl, he's your ex," and then proceeded to try and make the whole thing about her. She talked openly about how this new girl isn't as pretty or sociable as a certain past girlfriend of his. She called his new fiancée to ask her questions to make sure she was right for him. She started referring to herself as a stepmom-in-law-to-be. She wanted to be involved in the planning for the engagement party, in which she wanted to make a speech. It all made my brother and his fiancée very uncomfortable. I was very involved in planning the engagement party. My stepmom was so adamant that she had to be involved, and my dad asked my brother to let her, so to keep the peace we let her. But I gave my stepmom random irrelevant things to deal with so she couldn't have any actual say in the event. I had this woman choosing between 8 near-identical shades of taupe for the ribbons to go around vases. I made it clear to her that her being invited to the event in the first place was a courtesy, and that if she had any tact she would be ill that day. She of course showed up, wearing a white floor-length gown, unclear if it came with a headdress. So I asked some friends of mine to run interference to prevent her from talking to the couple. I also talked to the staff at the event and bribed them to make her day a little bit difficult. The photographer didn't manage to capture a single photo that included her all day, and asked to take the family photos while she happened to be in the bathroom. The bartenders gave her non-alcohol versions of every drink she ordered and spilled drinks on her twice. The waiters completely avoided going near her with canapes or drinks, and when she tried to make a speech, the microphone suddenly had unexplained feedback and stopped working. Then the music started back up. Afterward, she complained about how bad the event was. Everyone else seemed to have a good time, though, especially the couple. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened over 3 years ago, and while telling it to my friend, she laughingly said such a malicious compliance, so decided to share here. When I first started to my very first corporate job, there was a kitchen full of utensils and fridge and oven and stove and a dishwasher. A full-fledged kitchen for employees to make tea, coffee, heat their meals, even cook. They said I can bring my own glasses and put them there or use the company's. Also, there was a woman who was working in the kitchen. Let's call her Nilly, since she puts rules willy-nilly like a bully. Second day of my job, dear Nilly told me, "Let me remind you that no one should leave their dirty dishes in the sink." I was surprised by the claim. Since I am new and don't know a single crap, I thought this might be her way of bullying, or it might be actually true. So smiled and asked if this means I have to wash my own glasses. She said, "Yes, don't make me repeat it twice, honey. Let me remind you. There's a dishwasher. If she isn't cleaning the dishes, her only remaining job is vacuum the office once a week and bring tea, coffee to chiefs, to meetings, and to managers." So I decided to gather information and wait on it. Apparently, Nilly has been working in the company for 20 years and knows CEO. She knows how he drinks his tea, how he drinks his coffee, when he drinks them, what he eats with his coffee and tea. She knows all of them. If I know one thing, that is never fight a fight with the person who knows how your boss likes his coffee, especially if you're replaceable. So fight was not an option. Cool. I also learned that once a week CEO brings a bag of fruits to the kitchen to share in the company. Apparently he has a fruit garden and goes there for weekends, and she would take fruits to her house at the end of the day. Old employees knew that. They would take one or two in the day, that's how I learned this. She said to me I can get one from but it is hers, so I refused the first-time offer, thinking she bought it, then learned that it was brought by CEO. I think she implied that CEO brought it to her, and she was generous enough to share it with us peasants. But this is my interpretation of her statement. One thing about me, I look young and naive. I look dumb, as if there is some missing component in my brain. Cue malicious compliance. From my desk I could partially see the kitchen if I turn around. So on the day of fruit delivery, I was constantly checking the kitchen. When CEO came in, I count to 30 and went in as well. To wash my glasses, of course. I went in and said hi to everyone. This was my first time seeing CEO, so he said you must be new, kindly, and respectfully informed who I am, and he told me who he was. I said, "Sir, I've checked the company before entering and knew him," which he liked. After I turned to wash my dishes, he asked me what I was doing, and I said, "Oh, I was informed that all the staff wash their own dishes." At the same time, our Nilly said I must have mistaken that while laughing and taking the sponge and glasses out of my hand. I said, "But you," as if shocked, and cut myself as if realization hit me, then smiled like she is my best friend. Of course, I didn't stop there. I looked at the fruits. CEO told me to take some fruits. Added that he brought them to the company so all the staff could enjoy. I haven't said anything, but from my expression, CEO asked what was wrong. I told nothing and told, I always thought they were Nilly's, since... Then I just smiled and asked if I can take a plate of them. With a huge plate of fruit, accompanied by a huge smile, I went to my desk, shared them with my team. I don't even like fruits. Couple hours later, I went to kitchen, and our dear Nilly told me I had misunderstood things, and washing dishes was her job, and I shouldn't mistake again. And added fruits were for everyone to share, and I should have taken more if I wanted. I stupidly said, "Oh, I didn't know, and how sorry I am," to cause her trouble with a sorry smile. Guess who never had to wash dishes and had fruits to eat every day? If your answer is Cleopatra, probably yes, but also me. Nilly would also bring tea and coffee to me from time to time if someone she served did not want to drink. I would thank her with a huge smile and take it. Apparently she does this to all the employees she likes. I called them fruits instead of specifying what were they because CEO would bring apples, oranges, tangerines, pears, even sweet cherries. I don't remember what was the specific fruit that day. The next one is an entitled people story. So this was a couple of months ago. I was on my way to London and I took a night coach. For those unaware, a coach is like a luxury bus, seatbelts, leather seats, Wi-Fi, plugs, toilets, stuff like that. Start of the journey. Like most coaches, you have to book tickets in advance, but you can pay extra to reserve a seat. Any other seat is first come, first served. Where I get on is the first stop of the coach's route to London, so it's free rein to pick any seat not marked as reserved. I then go all the way back and choose to sit at the emergency exit. It has the most legroom, and there's some distance from the seat in front of me, so I can put the tray down and not breaking my neck watching a film on my tablet. It was a 10-hour journey, and I was enjoying my time watching some films on my tablet and munching on some snacks for the journey. I'm so used to traveling on buses and coaches, so this wasn't anything new. 3 hours in. At this point, it's midnight, and the coach arrives at a station to let a lot of people on. At the time, I didn't notice that someone was trying to talk to me. A mix of focused on the film and my headphones were noise canceling. He gave me a slight shake to get my attention, which he did. I took off my headphones and he asked me, "EP, can I sit there, please?" Now I thought he wanted to sit next to me, and he asked because my rucksack and shopping bag was on the other seat. I'm not antisocial, so I wasn't going to say no, but I decided ask to clarify, and this is the conversation that happens. Me: "Oh, do you want me to move my stuff for you to sit down?" EP: "No, I mean, can I have both of these seats for me and my wife?" Me: "Well, no, because I'm sitting here currently, mate." EP: "Yes, but we want to sit there, so give me these seats." Me: "Not being funny, mate, but I also want to sit here. That's the reason I sat here." EP: "I know, but I want to sit there now, so move, please." Me: "So where am I supposed to sit then?" EP: "The seats in front of us are free." Me: "There you go, you can sit there then." EP: "But that's not where we want to sit." Me: "Look, I'm sorry, mate, but I'm not going to move from where I am just because you want to sit here with your missus, all right? If you reserve these seats, then fair enough, I would absolutely move, but these seats aren't reserved, so no, I'm not moving. Excuse me." At that point, I put my headphones back on, and that was the end of that. I saw him walk down to the front of the coach, no idea if he went to complain to the driver or what, but I didn't care as I knew I was in the right. Sure, I was quite rude at the end, but I wasn't going to give up my spot just because someone asked me to when I had already settled down in the seat. A couple minutes later, I did see he and his wife come back up to me. They walked past and sat behind me. What's funny is that they glared at me as they walked by. It should be worth mentioning that he didn't have any visible or physical disabilities. If he needed legroom for a disabled access, he would have said, and even then, that's what the front of the coach is for disabled access. In fact, he and his wife were way skinnier than me, and I'm a fat bloke. For the last 6 hours, they sat behind me. I didn't hear what they were saying, but a part of me jokingly thought that they were planning to take over my seats if I went up and used the loo, but I never did, so I never found out. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.